district, you know the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text? That trash offer's the best? You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden, they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT District, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man. Y'all know what to do. It's the... And I'll always be traded. And I'll always be traded. And I'll always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them. Fish.
All right, welcome everybody to a Wednesday night edition of the Goat District podcast, a special 420 edition, and we've got a special guest on for you today. I think you're going to like him a lot, and we also have like a completely different cast because normally it's not Andrew and I running the show. But, today we're going to put Andrew in charge because it's fun to do, and Andrew always keeps everybody loose, like we were talking about a little bit beforehand. So I'm really looking forward to this one. This is a guy that, if you're into fantasy football at all, if you're into dynasty football at all, you have to have been following him almost since the beginning of your time in the game. And if you haven't been, that's unfortunate for you. But those of us who are following him have learned a lot just from, just following him on Twitter. Just all of his tweets and everything is just fantastic. But Andrew, why don't you go ahead and introduce our guest today, and let's get ourselves off and running.
Yeah, that's right, Dan. Just to make it clear, when you're given that vague description, you weren't talking about me. You're talking about the guest. So yeah, great beginning of the intro. Yeah, who knows who I am? But our guest has been in the fantasy industry since 2003. Been on the Football Guys senior staff writer since 2009. And the reason we have him on, his April 1st, the 17th edition of the Matt Waldman Rookie Scouting Portfolio came out. And so we're really happy to have Matt Waldman, who wrote the Rookie Scouting Portfolio, on today. Matt, welcome to the show. Love to have you.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. And this is going to be great. Especially anybody who is any group that's devoted to Dynasty is, that's awesome. It's not redraft people playing Dynasty. I'm sure we all play redraft and all that, but it's nice to be able to have a Dynasty pod. Yeah, every once in a while you want to mix it up a little bit.
We all have our seedy side, that we have.
Right, exactly.
I like it. Yeah, and I don't know if you could tell from the banner and the promo materials that we're sending out, Matt, but our fearless leader is Canadian, because he was saying favorite prospect with the U in the favorite. So
I'm used to that.
He's not here tonight. You got the inmates tonight.
That's all right, because I'm the inmate relative to the Canadian that got me started in this industry anyway. So it's all good.
That's wonderful. Can we start there a little bit? Because I want to talk about your process for this year. What sparked the 17 years ago desire to put together a rookie scouting portfolio? And then I know that you wrote a little bit about this year. What's been like the major change as you progressed over the years?
Wow. I started writing, I was a freelance writer for many years, but really that was my main job was as an operations manager at call centers, and then became a director in over quality for the corporation. It was a larger corporation with about 10,000 employees. So they were looking for ways to find best practices for how to evaluate performance. And so they sent me to some certification, thing for a week where I had to, work on that in Jacksonville, as a matter of fact.
Oh, love it.
Yeah. And it was based on, manufacturing techniques converted over to the industry that I was in. And so I was responsible for basically implementing a lot of that in our company and working with people to do that. And I was into fantasy football, started writing about it in 2003. And it just seemed like my strength was always playing in dynasty leagues and playing and looking for rookies. But it was mostly like it wasn't anything other than just keeping an eye on college football and having a slight advantage because it was new at that time. So I could fall asleep halfway through a game and see Steven Jackson for a few plays with my cat on top of me and go, he looks pretty good, even if I fall asleep and half my notes are like, gibberish. But, eventually I decided that after listening to Gil Brandt, of all people, on an NFL, .com mock draft, talk about Brian Westbrook and say if he was, 5 pounds heavier and 2 inches taller, he would be a top 5 overall pick. And it made me realize that the business world is not much different than the NFL world when it comes to how people value draft picks, not value talent, but value because all the things the draft capital is really a function of things outside. Talent is the baseline, but then there's all these things on top of it, like things that you can cover your assets with when you explain to your owner, your fans, the media, why you made this pick. So you didn't look like an idiot for picking an undersized light guy from Villanova who had 2 ACL injuries, who Florida State rescinded their scholarship of. You could pick him a little bit later, even though he might have very well been worth a top 5 overall pick.
Yeah.
So I started studying all of that and started realizing that I could implement the system that I used in my day job and gear it towards monitoring football and studying football players, because the system was set up to continuously improve. If you really follow it strictly, you're consistently redefining and adding what it is, the criteria you're looking for. And so I started learning about the game as I went, studying these players, kind of playing this gigantic game of I Spy on Word documents and Access databases and converting it over to other things. And as the time went on, I'd say the biggest changes have been from I used to have one sheet, kind of one grading system that was based on just what things they could do, but it really, I didn't think at the end of the day that they were showing how well they could do each of those things. So I ended up with 2 scoring system. One, they're both on a 100-point scale. One is, like a resume bullet points that show you all the things that they've gotten certifications on, all the things that their school education, all the highlight things that they're good at, that show you the broad range of what you might want from a receiver, even though different teams want different things. And then I started to hone in on what really makes them good at each of those things. So as a result of that, now I can have players with slightly lower grades in terms of this, like DK Metcalf's a guy who you don't want running routes like Odell Beckham Jr. Or the type of routes that Stephon Diggs might run. But the things he does well, he can do at a wide receiver 1 level for fantasy leagues. And so learning that kind of thing. And I'd say most of all, it's just continuing to learn the techniques and concepts of the game through interacting with a lot of, coaches and scouts and doing my own research and really just continuing to add to what I do and read and define things. So it's really that I've gotten more granular as the years have gone on, and that ability to go granular has allowed me to tie together things, in my opinion, that people always call are subjective. Obviously what I study is still a subjective thing, but I'm trying to define it well enough so that you can objectify it as best as you can. But, one of the things that people always say is you can't define intangibles. And I define intangibles as the it factor, which is integrated technique, because I believe if you look granularly enough at the techniques and the concepts and the athletic ability, and you define it well enough that you're having basic demands of those things embedded within your criteria, then you're going to notice when a quarterback makes certain reads and certain decisions, whether they do it with an intuitive level of speed and confidence, as opposed to being someone who may be more academic about it, but they do great on, the whiteboard in the pre-draft meetings, and they remember everything, and they're a future accountant or a future quality manager of America, but when you ask them to be intuitive about the work, when they have to think on their feet, you want the restaurant manager, over here, who has to integrate a lot of different things at quick speed so that you don't, so things don't go completely sour. And there's a difference, the NFL, for instance, I think drafts guys like, Andrew and me in terms of that thinking. Well, with a call center, you manage a call center, it's a lot like managing a restaurant, but you have to think on your feet in that level in a way that integrated technique is probably one of the biggest things that I've learned from that granularity.
No, it makes sense. You won't recognize this, but obviously Dan will, or the other co-hosts will, and obviously our listeners will. But I was heads down myself, popping back up. I'm not a tax accountant, but I've been MIA on Dan the last couple of months in the GOAT district, and I just loved your response when we reached out to you, Matt. I think we reached out to you in February, and your simple response was something like, "Yeah, I'm interested, but you got to get back to me after April 1st." So you're head down, grinding the tape. But the second it was April 1st, I gave you a day. By the way, MattWaldmanRSP.com. Go there, buy the guide. The previous year guides are there as well. But April 1st, I gave you a day, Matt. And on April 2nd, I said, "Hey, you in for the show?" And you were all about it. So it seemed like you were really head down in your process for this year's guide. So well worth the money spent to get it then.
Well, I appreciate it. And that's just how it is. People ask me how, and this is the easiest year I've had. But between December and April 1st, it's I'm studying all year, but now fantasy's over for me for a while, and then when you have to write everything up that you've studied in a month, and then get the edits back and go through that. Yeah, like usually people go, "How's it going?" I go, "I don't know yet. I've just got my head down. I'm praying." That's basically what's going on.
Oh, so good. So it's like you put me in the trip chamber for a second. I had to think like, what's on April 1st? But then it was like, obviously that was the RSP release date. So that's awesome. So let's dive into it again. This is MattWaldmanRSP.com. Let's start with the quarterbacks. Got to start here. This is the reason we want you on. We want to talk to you, Matt. You do all the film study, you grind. Look, I'm just watching college football to either watch Florida State lose or bet on it, but you're grinding the tapes, and you went into the study and you came out with a QB1, Skylar Thompson. I want to talk about it because I love it, because I'm not even betting on Skylar Thompson. So what about his tape stood out? And I think, again, if you even read the guide, there's you give a little bit of this, but just for the listeners, what was it about Skylar, and any hesitations about your results there?
Yeah, and this is something that's worthwhile for people to know, because the RSP is a pre-draft and post-draft guide. Mm-hmm. So if you're a fantasy player, understand that I love to look at talent without all that other stuff, like that I mentioned earlier. So I end up coming up with results that often seem far out there. Sometimes they are, but often enough. Yeah, the fact that I'm doing this full time, often enough, they turn out to be pretty telling. So what ends up happening is that I then incorporate draft capital later with the post-draft guide. So right now, it allows me to be brave with my assessments without having to worry about any type of group thing, because I don't look at things like, say, Lamar Jackson. I had no idea that Lamar Jackson won the Heisman Trophy until like 8 months later when I started studying him, because I don't pay attention to the media anymore. I'm literally just studying tape. And then if I occasionally see something, that's fine. So when I watched Skylar Thompson, what it was about him is that his pocket presence and decision-making are very important. And to me, when you watch Skylar Thompson, his ability to move in the pocket efficiently as well as dynamically, and know when to bait defenders within a step of him or when to move early enough to be able to know that he was going to have to move early and get away. He played in a West Coast offense, which you rarely see these days. He played in the same offense that Carson Wentz and Trey Lance played in, which don't associate their success or lack of success thus far with the offense. There's other things that have to do with that. But what you see is that he does have to make his line calls. He does have to make audibles. He has to change, make changes, and does that well, and is fluent in the verbiage, which is usually pretty dense for a West Coast offense, and the adjustments you make. So that's all good. The fact he's doing that, and then the accuracy. While some people will look at the stats, like the accuracy percentage stats, those are really incomplete contextual data. There's a lot better metrics out there to talk about accuracy in different granular ways. And his is pretty darn high, and surprisingly so. So when I first watched him, I thought, oh, man, this guy's going to be high on my board, and I know that no one's looking at him. Yeah. But I just, but you get used to that, and you just laugh, and you go, well, if he's good, he's good. And then, he was top of my board after I graded him and looked at the scoring, and because I usually grade everything first, and then I tally the score because I don't like to tally as I go because I think that influences.
Yeah, you may start grading on a curve to manage.
Yeah, it can't be that good. It can't be that bad or whatever you do. So I don't do that. I just go down the checklist and write things up and write it down. But you have a feeling I'm like this. I bet this is going to be a good score. So then he was at the top of my board, and I was like, I looked at after 5 games. I looked at it, and then I started looking at the volume of throws I saw. And I realized that because he plays in this West Coast offense that has him looking short to deep, which is the opposite of the way most quarterbacks read, and it's a running-oriented offense too. He didn't have as many many attempts. Yeah. So I thought, let me look at some more tape. And usually, if I really like someone or really don't, I watch more tape just to make sure there isn't any, try to eliminate some bias or if the charting data I have isn't as much as everybody else's. So I watched more of it, and his score was higher. So after seeing that, he was at the top of my board. I call it the anomaly tier this year, basically saying it's he either is has the potential to be one of the great anomalies of the past 10 years as a quarterback and become a good starter as a UDFA or a late round pick, or he just touched all the bias points in my system that I need to improve upon. And there was something that I underemphasized with what I saw with him or didn't notice. Now I'm more prone these days to look at that and go, he's probably pretty good. Okay. So, and I've asked around, and, I'll joke, my buddy Chad Ryder at NFL.com, he watches about 700 players a year. I watch, 170. So we watch things in a different way. And that's what he pretty much said to me. But when I told him that I had a really high score from him, his first response was, ew, and then we laughed about it. And then he said, I'm going to go back and look. And he wasn't all that high on him. But then I talked with my buddy Russ Landy, who's the head of U.S. scouting at the Montreal Alouettes and a former scout with the Rams and with the Browns. And he had talked to some different guys, and I talked to some more guys who were scouts that I can't mention because they're still active in certain
protected sources.
Yeah. And so the result that I got back, other than ew from Chad, is that they were like, I liked him. Now Russ' first thought was because if this is going to be my Ryan Nassib, because he was really high on Ryan Nassib way back then, he goes, you're going to owe me steak dinners for like the next 5 years, and I'm going to just shit talk you whenever we go to Mobile. So I said, deal. So after about 4 games, he texts me back and he goes, I'm all in on this kid. I like him. And so then he started asking people, and and the one guy I asked, who I would say is described as a curmudgeon, longtime veteran scout who's known for good quarterback scouting, had said, I don't have a first-round grade on him because there's not enough tape for a first-round grade, which is usually implied to say there's not enough production for me to justify it to my personnel head, because scouts have to be pragmatic. They can't so he knows how to be pragmatic, and they know that that's got to be justified. But he said plus accuracy, plus pocket presence. The arm isn't top 15 in the league caliber, but it's good enough to start and make all the throws that most offenses would ask, just not Matthew Stafford caliber. Right. And I would have given him a higher round grade if the production, there was enough tape for me to be able to show that. And then there was another guy who I know who has basically grew up in the building of a real true life NFL dynasty, whose father was a scout. And apparently he mentioned him too as like a guy without even us asking, going, have you seen Skylar Thompson? He's really good. And there's also an analytics guy that I can't name working for a major college team who I think feeds some information to the NFL. So we'll see if maybe anybody bites on this, but he has him as his number one. I'm not supposed to know who that he does, but I know that he does.
Okay,
so,
I like it.
So it's intriguing. It
is intriguing. Well, again, it's just like you open up the 1,000 pages, the labor of love, Matt, and it's just he's the first profile on the whole thing. So it's like, well, it's almost as if like, hey guys, I know you want to skip to the running backs, but nope, you got to read my profile on Skylar first, and how I feel about it. So I love it. And I guess, and I'll skip the 2 names we have on the show sheet and kind of wrap them up into a question in a second, but. you touched on it. This is the pre-draft edition to the RSP. There'll be a post-draft edition. Yeah, he's an undrafted free agent. Does he just tumble down the board because you're still factoring in draft capital in terms of your rankings as a necessary evil?
You do, because this is what I like to tell fantasy players who are new to the RSP, because usually they get it the first year. They look at the pre-draft, and they may really love that, or they're like just the answers man type of people, and they're like, wow, this is just too much, even with the bookmarks and all that. Then they get the post-draft, and they're super excited about that because it's short. It's got a tiered cheat sheet. It has this whole thing with ADP versus my rankings. It has a sweet spot. So if I tell you to draft Nick Chubb over Saquon Barkley in the pre-draft, then I show you that I still have Chubb number one, but I'm telling you this is where you can wait to draft him and still get him at value without losing him. So I do that type of work for you. So that usually they invariably come back to me and go, could you just sell the post-draft instead and not do the pre-draft at all? And I say, I know that sounds nuts. And it's not just from a business decision of saying I did all this work that informs me to do the post-draft as this pre-draft, but I'm like, just wait a year or two, because you're going to find in your dynasty leagues or your redraft or your DFS or high stakes that the pre-draft is the truer depiction of what they could do if you subtract all the BS that the NFL does and the real world puts into it. It's like the innocence is that. And one day when some player that you forgot about ends up getting an opportunity to play a major role, you're going to have a full scouting report that's minus all that draft capital BS that's necessary. And then that helps you more than just your rookie draft. And people usually come back to me 3 years later and they go, I didn't believe you when you said it. I just thought you were trying to just make sure that, that people weren't going to undercut your stuff by doing this. But that I love the pre-draft now more because of that. So that capital goes in for the dynasty part so that you have a realistic way of how to use them in the rookie draft. But then I try and recommend people that when it comes to waiver wire, and unknown guys who haven't really emerged yet, forget the post-draft guide, because the draft's over now at this point. Go back to the pre-draft guide, and that's the true test of their talent, because if they get the opportunity, that's the truer measure.
I like it. If you don't love Matt at his 1,000 pages, you can't have him at his 80 pages or 10 pages. Right. All right. So I guess last question here in the quarterback segment, how to play this in Superflex. So let me wrap the two names. I only picked the two names because, they're quarterbacks 2 and 5 on your list. So Carson Strong and Bailey Zappi, a great 2021 betting favorite, just an absolute delight to bet on Western Kentucky and Bailey Zappi. But I guess the question here, how to play this in Superflex if you maybe the quarterbacks go in round 1, maybe we don't. And again, we're going to get into running backs and wide receivers in a little bit, but maybe the running backs, wide receivers dry up in round 2. Is the move to, as you were just saying, go back to the pre-draft guide and kind of look at, hey, who are the quarterbacks that I may want to take dart throws on that you like their scouting portfolios? Because again, in round 3 or late round 2 or whatever it is, given that you've got a very different top 5-ish than I think the consensus top 5 would have it as part of ADP.
Yeah, I do. And it's funny, though, because every scout and person I've talked to, it's like I hear the only quarterback I'd ever draft in this group is Malik Willis. And then 5 other people go, I wouldn't even draft Malik Willis. And then and each of them have a different guy that would be the only guy that they would draft. So it's it's been crazy this year. So because of that, I agree with you that I think what you do is if there's one of the guys that the consensus likes who drops to round 2, maybe you go for him as your hopeful QB1. Mm-hmm. And then you wait for those guys like Bailey Zappi, Skylar Thompson, or Carson Strong if he falls because of the knee. And it's not a Jay Ajayi knee thing. It's more of we need a redshirt year for him and he should be fine. If that happens, then you can take a chance. Or moreover, maybe just take a chance on one guy and build up on wide receiver and running back this year. And if you have a 1.5 premium for tight end, maybe one of the top 2 tight ends in this class, absolutely Trey McBride. And then you just kind of roll from there and just know that if I miss out on the quarterback this year, not a big deal, because I mean, we look at the data anyway, and we talk about Super Bowl caliber quarterbacks or Pro Bowl caliber quarterbacks, and the hit rate is so low that while there's a desperation to get them, I think it's just better that build your surplus. If you're really, this is the thing that I think people forget. If you already have strong receivers, already have really strong running backs, and you're not sure about the other positions in this class, just keep picking at your strength.
Yeah.
Don't try and shore up your weakness. Don't pick for need. Keep build. If you've got, I did this with quarterbacks, which is usually the hardest thing to do because nobody wants to trade quarterbacks, or you only start. I've been in one quarterback leagues in Dynasty with IDP and 40, 50 man rosters. And there's been years I'm I'm in that in-between stage where I was rebuilding. And it's for 2 years, I'm too good to have a top 5 pick and not good enough to make the playoffs. So I was just screw it. I'm going to keep picking quarterbacks. And then you end up with, Russell Wilson, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, and everyone in your league's I need a top 5 quarterback because Matt has all top 5 quarterbacks and he's not trading anybody. And then eventually you hit on some other players, but then you can say, all right, I'll trade Russell Wilson for Jonathan Taylor and a pick.
Yeah.
I'll use this pick and a defensive player I got good at, and this other guy, and I'll get Nick Chubb, and then I'll win a championship with two of those 4 quarterbacks, that were left. And people forget that. If you do that with wide receiver, you do that with running back, they're very liquid in terms of negotiations with trades, and you build on that surplus, and then you can pick whoever you want to target with trades. And you can be more than fair with it, especially if you're close enough to go over the top. If you spend a little bit more and maybe it wasn't the best deal for you, well, who cares if all you need is one guy or 2 guys to do that, and you're getting a 25-year-old Jonathan Taylor. And that's my point with with that.
I like it. Okay, so that's the way to play it in Superflex. And Dan, speaking of Superflex, you and I just did a Dynasty startup draft on our friends at FFPC. They've got the new RotoViz Triflex leagues. This is the second year of existence, an extra wide receiver spot, including Superflex, no kicker, no defense. Our friends at the FFPC are killing it. Drafts from $77 all the way up to $12.50 are going off now. We were able to sneak in one more $7.50, Dan, that you and I are splitting before the NFL draft, which was great for our clock. We had to promise to be chip about our draft picks. But we were able to get it in. A lot of sharps in that room. First round started today. Draft started today. We made our first pick there. Justin Jefferson at the 107. We made a trade to move up, and we already got the collusions talk going, which was great, and we didn't. But we're up and about a pick, Dan. So that'll be exciting. But yeah, our friends at FFPC killing it. They sold out their early best ball tournament. They're doing their second year of their regular best ball tournament, double the prizes this year. If you guys have not played at FFPC, a lot of our listeners do, but if you've not, Matt, including you, not sure if you have, but if you need it, we've got a $35 credit for best ball. If you let us know, we can get you set up with an FFPC credit for all of your best ball or dynasty needs.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and before we move on to the next, I just want to kind of back up and just ask one more general question of you, Matt. Everybody talks about 2022 is a weak class. Do you see this as being a weak class, or what's your opinion of the class overall as somebody who's studied the last 17 classes?
Yeah, for skill positions, I don't think it's unbelievably weak. I just think it's I'd say the more nuanced way to say it is it's highly boom bust this year compared to other classes. This running back class, this wide receiver class, if everybody stays healthy, if they get opportunities, whereas running back may not get a lot of opportunities this year compared to some other groups, but it is talented. If both those hit the way that they could hit, like if it's maximized, they could be as good as any of the classes from the past 3 to 4 years, with the exception of maybe last year's wide receiver class. But that's pretty, and especially if 2 or 3 of these quarterbacks end up working out, that would solidify it too. But it's just one of those things that, I don't pay attention to that too much, because last time I even listened to it a little bit was when people were like, this Deshaun Watson, Patrick Mahomes class is just not all that good compared to last year's class. And I'm sitting there and I'm just like, yeah, okay, whatever, you know. And a lot of that is informed by media folks who've formed that opinion from cursory watching of the players, and then it may be some other things. Quarterback tends to have to be very strong for them to like it as a class, and it's too boom bust at this point.
Yeah, and of course in the fantasy business, there's a lot of feedback, you know, where it's
echo chamber. Yeah,
it is very much an echo chamber, and you know, the more you hear it, the more you believe it, the more you say it, and you know, so it's sometimes good to step back from that, and you know, and just get a you know, that's why I like what you do, because you do, you know, go into it head down without looking and thinking about what anybody else thinks about it. You're just going through and you're doing your process like you do every year, and so you come up with, I think, you know, a much more unbiased opinion about you know, the players and the relative strengths of each player, each position, all that kind of stuff. So
Matt, you got better cojones than me, because I can see myself just like conforming to the norm and like, all right, I got to listen to echo chamber, but I love it. You just like, no, this is how I grade the players. This is how I feel about them. It's work. I would swim with the rest of the fish. That's me.
Hey, listen, I appreciate it, and it's, you know, it's tough. I mean, you get a clue of where you're at that's different, and every year there's always going to be somebody that you kind of agonize over. But over time, I mean, when I first started doing this, I remember, you know, when I really knew far less than I do now about this, and I'm still learning, obviously, but it's like, I remember grading a player by the name of Greg Bell, who was a running back out of Arizona, and I had him like pretty high on my board. I think he was in my top 5 to 7, which wasn't bad for a running back, and nobody had heard of him, and he was a UDFA that year. And I was like, well, what do I know? This is my first year doing this. I locked myself in a hotel to do whatever I could put out at this point while I was still working full time. And then he went undrafted, and I laughed about it. And then he ended up starting to begin the year for the Denver Broncos, and playing pretty well enough that it was like, okay, well, maybe there's something to this, and that's the thing, especially when you hear scouts say, or somebody write to you and they go, yeah, I don't like him. I don't like what he does here. And he didn't do well with my accuracy model or this. And you have to go, I'm ignoring it, because from what I'm seeing, he looks great. And because if you don't follow your compass, you're just going to get blown by the winds of what everybody else is doing. And then you can't stick to your process, because you get lost. You lose track of what it is you deviated from. So it just makes more sense that, you know, I learn from there and do that. But it's, you know, I appreciate it. And, you know, my name isn't Jane, and I don't sell soap in some sorority house on King of the Hill. So
I love it. All right, so getting into running backs, and I'll kind of pose it in terms of a betting model. Maybe, I don't know if you're a betting guy, Matt, but I put it in the show sheet. Breece Hall, Kenneth Walker, I looked up their odds and implied percentages to be the first running back off the board. So in terms of the NFL's mind, so for fitting fantasy for a second. So right now, my book, which is totally onshore, totally legal, no problems here, minus 286 for Breece Hall to be the first overall pick, 74% odds. Kenneth Walker, plus 236, which is about 30% odds to be the first pick. And just jumping off there, I want to know, does Kenneth Walker, is he close enough to Breece Hall to potentially challenge for that spot? Or is Breece Hall just obviously the better looking potential NFL running back?
No, I think it's very close. It's closer than people maybe realize. And it's just that the fact of the matter is that Breece Hall maybe expresses some physical skills a little bit better, or has a little more upside with his size, though, because he's taller. People have that perception. Whereas, you know, Walker is not small; he's just short, and that's a little bit of a different thing. Walker's a little more refined of a player, but the upside that Hall could express could be a little higher than Walker overall. But I'd say it's not all that different.
Not that far off.
Yeah, and if one team decides that if there's a team out there, like say the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who like to duo block, which is more of a tight crease type of blocking scheme, and you need a back who's really good with tight creases, well, Walker's better at that. than Hall is. So if one team goes, we need a back like that, he could be that niche fit for them.
I like it. Yeah, because I think you had a pretty high grade on Brees as well, right? I think you expressed some level of hesitation in terms of your grade. I think what you called him the Brian Westbrook corollary, or
Michael Westbrook.
Michael Westbrook. Sorry, excuse me. Yes, thank you. Yes.
Yeah. It's just more that sometimes I like to share sometimes that because I'm so process oriented with what I do, and I stick with that even if I have gut feelings about players. I mean, usually, these days you have gut feelings, but I need to justify what it is that I'm seeing. So if I don't see what it is that my gut feelings about, I'm rolling with what it is that I went down with. I might mention some things just for entertainment value or for whatever. So, I found that, we all in some days, whether it was in elementary school, high school, college, adulthood, that we've had bad pickers from time to time, whether it's relationships or jobs or roommates or whatever it is, and for me, my bad picker in fantasy was always ultra talented, ultra physically talented guys who show flashes of brilliance, who for some reason off the field just can't get it together. And it's usually because they want to fight people, or they want to do drugs, or they just let their life go out of control. And Michael Westbrook was that kind of guy for me, like that I was like head over heels for it. And when I look at Breece Hall, there's just something about him that just looks like everything's too easy. It just comes too easy for him. And I see little lapses and errors with his game that I think he can correct. I'd still draft him first overall in most leagues. Okay. So I might switch. Okay. I might switch it up with Walker every once in a while, just because I really like Walker. And if everybody beats me to Hall, I'd gladly take Walker. I'll be thrilled with him because I love J.K. Dobbins and Ray Rice as a player. I like both of those guys for years, and he reminds me of those guys.
Ray Rice is full name now, by the way. Ray Rice as a player.
Let's talk about Kenneth Walker's hands. I mean, it's the most ginormous debate on Twitter of anything related to the running backs is can Kenneth Walker catch passes or not?
The answer is yeah. It's yes. I mean, yes, he can catch passes, but it's like this was the same debate that I remember was asked of Leonard Fournette and Melvin Gordon, because they didn't have enough data to be able to make that assessment, because they weren't looking at the film. They were looking at the stats of like, well, he has to have a certain number of receptions for us to feel comfortable about that. But when I watched Walker as well as Fournette or Gordon on tape, they catch the ball with their hands. They use the position that they need to use well to frame their hands in the right position at the ball in terms of the trajectory that the ball is arriving. They extend their arms to catch the ball away. They know, they show ability to adjust away from their frame, high or low. They can take some contact and be able to catch the ball. Do they run routes like Austin Eckler? No. How many people get to run routes like Austin Eckler in the NFL? One. So, I mean, at that point, if I see a player do enough with a handful of catches where I can say he does the basics, it's not just a matter of whether the team wants to use him or if he develops as a route runner to an advanced level. That's another story. I'm fine with that, even if the quantity isn't quite there.
Like it. And then on Spiller, just to move on there, I think, Dan, you actually put this well, the double counting, and maybe I'm putting words in your mouth. We had a recent podcast with Abib. I think there's some double counting that Isaiah Spiller didn't test well, but I don't think there was an expectation that he'd test well. So is he getting double knocked? How close is Isaiah Spiller to the Hall and the Walker?
I would say he's close to that tier. In fact, I'm trying to remember if I actually put him in that same tier. Let me look real quick.
I did. Make a note that you had a cusp on the the starter level.
Yeah. So he's in the same tier. I have 4 players in the same tier, and Hall and Walker are at the top of that, and Spiller's third. And I just think that I never worry about the speed. That's another thing, because speed's a little overrated for a lot of systems. Unless you're in the Mike Shanahan system where you can clear a highway because of your blockers, that you have. I mean, we have Trent Williams, Kyle Juszczyk, and George Kittle. You have the three best at each of those positions as blockers. You're going to create huge lanes, and you can be basically a guy who needs a compass to find yards and still get it as long as you have speed. And I would say that Elijah Mitchell needs a compass sometimes to find the hole, unless it's like abundantly apparent. But he has a lot of speed, and that's worked out well for him. And I think that Spiller is more of a guy that can run an outside zone because he has the short area quickness and the acceleration, great footwork. He makes good decisions overall. The ones where he doesn't make good are on gap plays, which you don't see a lot of gap plays in the NFL. And they're minor lapses that he can fix, even though, my buddy Jay Moyer over at Fantasy Astronauts might say that if he had him and he did that, he would have benched him. He's benched high school players for less with some of the decisions that Spiller's made. But I've seen pros do dumb stuff like that all the time. So he's worth it. He'll be okay.
I like it. I'll describe them as hammers, and you can talk me off of it, but maybe we compare and contrast a little bit your RB4 to your RB5 here, Brian Robinson and Zamir White. I know Zamir White's a favorite of Dan's. Are they both similar hammers, or is Brian Robinson just more of a mallet and Zamir White's doing his best impression of a hammer? What are the compare and contrast there?
Well, you get a little bit more with Brian Robinson. You get a guy who's pretty nifty with his feet and shows some ability to change direction in a manner that may be a little better than Zamir White. He also understands the difference of when to be a hammer and when to be, maybe more of a tool of finesse. And he's a good pass protector, soft hands. I think his pass protection makes him a better option right away than Zamir White, who has promise as a pass protector, but sometimes misjudges some angles with certain types of assignments. White has good hands. He has, he's got more straight line speed for sure, but the power is very good. It's based on pad level and how he attacks, but he's not, he runs where it looks like he's 226, but he's only 206, whereas Brian Robinson is a true 225 and runs like that. So, I see Zamir White as more of like a Thomas Jones type of player, maybe a more refined decision maker in the mold of Ronald Jones. Okay. And, kind of what people hope Ronald Jones would be.
Could have been, yeah.
And then Robinson to me is more like, if you remember Larry Johnson, an angry player on and off the field, but on the field, it worked pretty well for him with Kansas City. I like both of them a lot, but I think, White is an amazing worker. Robinson gets underplayed because he had to deal with Damian Harris, Josh Jacobs, and a couple other really good backs. And people are like, well, he didn't start for most of his career. And it's just like, well, Priest Holmes didn't either. Yeah. Willie Parker didn't either. So let's forget about that for a minute and just look at what they did when they were on the field.
I like it. One more player, then we'll get into some nonsense and some rapid fire running backs. But Kennedy Brooks, you have him rated pretty highly out of Oklahoma. What did Kennedy do well that you liked on the film?
Man, players who are very efficient with their footwork that's important. A lot of people overlook that because they see these wild like jump cuts and athletic moves, and that's like low-hanging fruit for them to say, see, he's an NFL athlete. But he's not an NFL decision maker when you jump cut 3 yards in front of you and slam your head first into the butt of your pulling guard or your tackle when you're trying to make a cut. You need to be able to do it very efficiently. And guys like Kennedy Brooks have great contact balance, have the efficient footwork. They can be dynamic with their feet when they need to be. He has better athletic ability than I even estimated for him, which was a pleasant surprise and moved him up a little bit more. And he really understands pre-snap how to set up creases. He runs to open leverage. He doesn't run to open space. And that's more important because if you run to open space in the college game and you do that too often, you end up running towards defenders who infiltrate that gap and when you get there, and that's not open space anymore. But when you understand the blocking concepts and you can anticipate where the openings are going to be and you set them up with patience, and he's the most patient back I've seen in a while. He, to me, is it's like if I was going to make a long shot bet, I've been saying this, this month a lot, but if I was going to make a long shot bet on a player to like have a Terrell Davis type of surprise, like people would go, where did he come from to become a starter? And the state of Oklahoma goes, look, fools, we knew about this guy forever. It would be Kennedy Brooks, because he has that nuance to his game, the mental, intuitive nuance and the small techniques that could really make him compensate for what he's compensate for whatever lack of high-end starter athletic ability. He has enough for the baseline to be a starter.
I like it. So Dan, let me share something really quickly. So Matt, you've reached the intersection of Dan and Andrew with this one player. Here we go. Hold on. Can you add that to the chat here? Hold on. Are you able to add that so our listeners can see? This is a Facebook post. That's me on the left there. Must be nice to have a Dalvin Cook, but what do we know? So he just scored obviously one of Dalvin Cook's long touchdowns here. So here's where I'm going with this, Matt. You love the word curvilinear when it comes to Dalvin Cook. The first thing I do when I open the RSP, control F, curvilinear. Who's the curvilinear player? Last year, Khalil Herbert, which is a great pick. I have a lot of Khalil Herbert and kind of didn't stop buying. But then also the player who got tagged with that adjective this year was Abram Smith out of Baylor. I don't know if you can see over Dan's head there. Baylor guy.
Yeah.
So before we get to rapid fire, just wanted to talk a little bit about Abram Smith and the word curvilinear. And I have a joke at the end of this one too, but as if I'm not one big joke. But what's your take on Abram Smith, and should we be seeing him in the same light as Khalil Herbert, or should I just not worry about this year's curvilinear athlete?
Yeah. I mean, and the whole thing about the curvilinear thing is that I was high on Dalvin Cook. A lot of the analytics people weren't, because they didn't like his vertical. They didn't like some of his metrics, even from the Spark days back in high school. And this was one of those things that was a lesson, I think, for them to learn, is that metrics need to be matched up with how the player plays. And if the player has a style that doesn't fit the metrics, then you look at how effective the style is, and you can go from there. And Dalvin Cook was that way. And that curvilinear movement I learned from a guy by the name of Sean Miska, who you can follow on Twitter at Movement Miyagi, like, Miyagi-Do karate. And he is a movement specialist who works with NFL players like, say, Minnesota's Everson Griffith. He worked with him for many years, and other players like that. And he brought that term to light. I've made it popular in the fantasy sphere.
I love it.
So Abram Smith is a fantastic player if you put him in outside zone. Most players, I like to argue with people because they're always talking about getting coached up or he's instinctive. And I like to tell people, it's like, listen, man, most players are not as instinctive as you think. Most of them have to put in a lot of work to make it look instinctive. But every once in a while, you'll get a player who's just kind of a natural at some aspect of their game, and to a level that when you put them in, you're like, who's this guy who looks like he's like a 5-year veteran running outside zone, at Baylor? A former linebacker with 2 ACL tears who looks like he can't bend, like he can't drop his weight, and he looks like basically Fred Sanford getting up out of his chair and doing the heart attack thing when he walks out. There's a little bit of that going on with Abram Smith. He's a little creaky looking, compared to some of these other guys.
Having watched quite a bit of him, yes, that's you put your finger on it right there.
He's like the dude with old man game who like gets into the lane like at the rec center or at the park, and he's playing against guys like 15 years, 25 years younger than him, but he has all the nuance of a post-up game that no one can stop him, even though he's still dressed in like the sweatband and the tube socks with the stripes, and he's got the short shorts on, and he's probably still got like the jersey with the 3/4 sleeves and the softball jersey, and he's out there huffing and puffing and sweating up a storm and a big beer gut. And he's sinking everything. Every time the ball gets into him, it's over. Yeah. Abram Smith is that player for running backs in this class, because when you give him the ball on outside zone, he just has perfect timing and feel for when to press, how to cut back, which lane to choose. It's fantastic. And you're just looking at him and going, and he has the curvilinear movement to compensate for the fact that he just can't bend and cut anymore the way that he did. But he really does he can run through you. I would not be shocked at all if he winds up on an outside zone team and maybe he's, a 5th or 6th round pick or an undrafted guy. And in 3 years, somebody gets hurt and he reels off 450 yards in 3 games.
Yeah, he's going for
touchdowns.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
and
right.
Everyone's going to be like, oh my God, Abram Smith, and then he'll go back to being a high-end backup for somebody, or maybe have 1 or 2 really good starter seasons. But you got to keep an eye on him.
I'm so glad. Put a smile on my face.
That is like the 3 months I will be in my glory on Twitter. So I'll be like, I told you.
You and Jeff Bell at Football Guys. He was like, he asked me about, what do you think about Abram Smith? I said, I'll let you know when I'm done. And then when I started showing, he looked at it. The first thing he looked at, he was like, "Oh, it makes me feel good about Abram because I like him too."
Yeah. All right, we're tuning up the clock with you, Matt. This is great. We'll try to keep it tight for you, and if you've got time to go. But let me bring one nonsense question. Since we just brought up curvilinear, if Mel Kiper, Jay Billis for the NBA draft, tremendous upside potential, drinking game, wingspan, drinking game, saying length like that, drinking game. If somebody was playing a drinking game with the RSP, which they should get at mattwaldmanrsp.com, what would be the most devastating word in our, not a word that you like? What's like a Matt? Is it like curvilinear? Is it micro movements? I think you mentioned it. Like, what would just absolutely just ruin someone's day? That's such a Matt Waldman term in the RSP.
Yeah, curvilinear would probably do it. That would be one. I think processing. If you get processing speed. You need the
ING though to drink though. You can't just get processed. You need to processing.
Yeah, okay. Probably, or processor. Is either processor or processing. But some of those would probably do it. I would say the best one, if you really want to play the drinking game, the best thing to do is go back to the early RSPs before I had really good editing teams and I was losing a lot of sleep. And you have to do like a beer bong every time you see me misreference a player and substitute a name from an 80s ACC basketball star instead. Because when I'm tired, for some reason, my mind shifts off of the player and I conflate it with a basketball player from the 1980s. So, yeah.
I love it. All right, so let's go rapid fire if we can. Maybe like one sentence each on these running backs. I know some of the chat has one too. If you don't mind putting up the other one, because I kind of have like a hidden thing for 1912 fantasy. Yeah, Isaiah Pacheco. I know that he was relatively high on your list. You have like a sentence on Isaiah, maybe touch on Hassan Haskins as well. One sentence each or so.
Sure. Isaiah Pacheco is a fast back with good pad level who runs with better decision making than people thought, with soft hands, who his upside could approach Cam Akers if he gets in the right system and continues to get opportunities. And then Hassan Haskins, he's a good gap runner without speed and has to get his hips and his pads aligned in a way where he can maximize his power. Might fit in nicely as a reserve back who can give you some positive production, but he's not James Conner. James Conner was faster, quicker.
Got it. All right, Kevin Harris, use your RB8.
I'm a big fan of Kevin Harris's ability good pad level, catches the ball better than you think. Smart player who the biggest if is that South Carolina seems to be lately a place where you don't want to bet on guys with promise because they tend to, kind of fizzle out.
Yeah. Pierre Strong, but I only want you to say bad things for the audience, and then you text Dan and I how you really feel about Pierre Strong. Okay, so I'll just keep winking as I say this, But no, I mean, he's kind of a Raheem Mostert type of potential player with speed, understanding of how to play outside zone. There's things to build on. The one lapse he has that is an issue he may have to work on is he falls down a lot when he makes certain cuts.
and it has to do with how his feet are placed in the line. He's got to correct that, or else he's going to have some problems.
I like it. Rashad White, I like him a lot as kind of like the third or fourth running back, and what the hell do I know? But obviously you're more down on him than most. What was it about Rashad White's game that
a lot of people like him because he's got the speed, he's got the size, he's got the soft hands, and he can catch. So all of that feels good. I did not see good decision making when he had opportunities to be one-on-one against the defender in the hole. And when you have that, you need to take advantage of it. He'll dip halfway into the hole, see that, and try and escape it. And he runs to open space rather than to running to leverage. So think Kalen Ballage, Kenyon Drake, guys like that, where the potential's there, but maybe we're a little too high just yet. I think he has to develop. And if he thinks that he's great now, it could be problems.
Got it. Okay, and the last one's for me to the audience, but you're more than welcome to chime in, Matt. Ty Davis-Price, he obliterated Florida. As a Florida State fan, it was an absolute delight to watch that game. So that's my only analysis on Ty Davis-Price, is he just unloaded against the Gators this past year. So
I like
you're more than
him.
welcome to chime in.
I like Ty Davis-Price. I think that the questions are, I guess there's questions about his effort, but like his pass protection against UCLA, if you want to go watch a clinic on a guy who's a very aspiring, very good pass protector who could become even better in the NFL, that's the game to watch with him. And the speed, I was shocked that he was as fast as he was running that, running at the combine. I know people were like, you get a 4.3, you get a 4.3, that was kind of the theme, but he's a good running back and he's a sleeper too in this class.
I love it. Okay. So we got to move on to wide receivers, but before we do, Underdog plug. Underdog, they're absolutely killing these really fun contests. The one that's still open now, closes on draft day, is the rookies and sophomores draft. I think it's they draft 12 or so players, only rookies, only sophomores. This is exactly why we have Matt Waldman on. So the rookies before everyone else does, before draft day. I think it's super flex format too. Looks super fun. $10 to enter. The contest looks about 60% fill. So who knows if they fill the other 40% in a week. But a great time to jump in. We have a promo code. I think it's GOAT, Dan, to use. We can confirm. You slide into Dan or I or JD's mentions. We'll make sure you get sorted out with the right promo code.
It is district.
District. Boy.
Yes.
I knew it was one of two words. Love it. Promo code District. Go to Underdog. Crush the rookies in the sophomores draft. Matt, thanks for hanging with us. We'll move through the wide receivers. Obviously, really appreciative of all your time you've given us.
Pleasure.
Chris Olave, wide receiver number 1. The Andrew anecdotal scouting, that's me, and that's how I scout because I don't actually watch film. I think Olave is a lot like Kadarius Toney, where people are thinking, boy, not in terms of how they play, but in terms of an older player not really believing the first round draft capital that they may get. Not in terms of style of play, but you have Chris Olave as your wide receiver 1. What did you like about him, even though he may be, not the coveted junior declare that people like?
Yeah, well, people like Henry Ruggs. They like Corey Coleman. They liked name a speedster who got basically picked ahead of Michael Thomas, Mike Williams, Juju Smith-Schuster, A.J. Brown, and Justin Jefferson, and failed. There's probably about 7 or 8 of these guys. Will Fuller's added to that list. And what often happens is that people covet speed way too much. And when they look at Chris Olave, he's more than fast enough. He's got strong speed. He's also not as flashy of a mover. And when you compare him and contrast him with Garrett Wilson, people see Wilson making all these flash plays last year, and they think, well, Olave kind of got put in the background here. So what happened? Maybe he's not quite that good. In the same way that TJ Hushmanzada was drafted before Chris Johnson or Chad Ochocinco. And Chad Ochocinco, they both played on the same team. And Chad Ochocinco was the better player when they both ended up on the same team in the NFL. But Olave is a smoother route runner. He's better off the jam. He's a better tracker of the football. His hands position have less lapses. He's smarter in the open field where he doesn't try and make, I would say this about Garrett Wilson. And Garrett Wilson's a good player. He's very well worth drafting. He's still high on my board. But he's the type of player that will see an open lane to get the 3 yards he needs on a 3rd and 7 on a 5-yard catch to get the first down, and he'll ignore it to go run towards defenders with the hope of gaining 70 and end up losing 3 from the catch that he made. And now it's 4th down and they got a punt. Like, that's a Marquise Lee type of thing. That's a lot of players like that who make those things. He looks like he's doing math catching those. Yeah. And when you have to do math to catch the football because you're clapping onto it, and it looks like, he makes great catches, but he has some lapses with that he's got to correct. So he's almost there with Olave, but Olave is the type of guy that if he winds up on the Green Bay Packers, he could probably play all 3 positions. He could probably end up being the leading receiver for Aaron Rodgers year 1 and being a top player. And he's more the Robert Woods to Garrett Wilson's Marquise Lee, even though I think they're all 4 of them are different players. It's just an analogy to say he could be, he's less unsung, but better, but maybe a little bit more refined. And because I'm not scouting for a specific team where the Saints might go, we want a guy who's fast on turf, who can do these certain things that fit Garrett Wilson. I'm looking at a broader standpoint. Olave checks more boxes.
I like it. If to put you on the spot with a question not on the list, so you just tell me to pass if I've done too much here.
Go for it.
If Keenan Allen's 100 as a route runner, if he's the curve there, what's Chris Olave compared to a Keenan Allen?
Well, I mean, most guys, let's deduct 10 to 15 points just for the fact that you're not in the NFL and you're not facing pro press coverage guys. But I'd say if we could add back, say, 7 points, if everything works out well, then I would probably put him at, if Keenan Allen's 100, I'd put him somewhere between 89 and 93.
I like it. I like it a lot. Okay, we touched on Wilson there as well. So I've got a little bit of types. So again, let me do a little bit of compare and contrast. I've been making a really stupid joke called Pickens rhymes with Higgins, which obviously it doesn't. But then also your number 2 wide receiver, Drake London. In terms of like the bigger looking guys, George Pickens versus Drake London. Obviously, you've got a difference in rankings, but I would talk about them both in kind of the same compare and contrast mold.
Sure, because they're both potential starters.
Yep.
One, I just happen to think Drake London is more versatile for you right now and more likely to be able to start right away and then build on his game more. Whereas with Pickens, I think he's going to need to build on his game to be the same type of starter that Drake can become. And it's in the sense of that where like it might take him 2 to 3 more years if he does it. Pickens to me is more Kenny Golladay circa Detroit, where you had to have Marvin Jones and Golden Tate on each side so that he could match up against a linebacker or a safety or a nickelback and use his size and speed, but not have to do a lot nuance with routes. And that's where I think Pickens is right now. He makes beautiful catches, great hand-eye coordination. His positioning leads him to sometimes have to make things more difficult than it should be. London doesn't have to be that difficult with it. He's a better runner after the catch, more physical at every part of football. And I think he's a more technically sound route runner than Pickens right now.
I like it. Okay. So Jameson Williams, wide receiver 3.
Before we get off Pickens, I've got to get Matt's opinion on how would you grade his left-handed roundhouse punch?
Hey, I would say, it's on the Michael Westbrook scale. I mean, it's not quite there because if you can knock out Stephen Davis, you're pretty darn. You've got a pretty hefty. You got some concrete in your fists, but I mean, he might be. We might be able to put him into like a local tournament, and maybe he can ascend to the Golden Gloves after that. But he's not at MMA level Michael Westbrook. That's for sure.
All right. Just had to check on that.
I'll end up putting Jameson in the quick hitters bucket because I actually want to spend some time on your wide receiver 5. In the show notes, I got Justin Ross with 3 exclamation points. Florida State fan here, hated when Clemson was good, hated seeing Justin Ross dominate. Florida State, he was always a threat. Very similar to the DeAndre Hopkins, T. Higgins, et cetera. All these Clemson receivers just dunking on me left or right here in the last 5 to 7 years. Justin Ross, what'd you like about his game as wide receiver 5 for you in terms of grading him there?
Yeah, because he's actually better with releases than I think people think. He's very good against physical coverage. It just does not phase him. The hand fighting, the dragging, the pulling, any type of fouls committed. Yeah. He's going to still maintain his position, win position late, make the catch against physical coverage and do well. And when you saw him early in his career, he had more than enough speed and quickness to be able to separate against top caliber defenders. He may not be a Blazer. He's not Jameson Williams, but he could be Hakeem Nicks in that type of thing. The thing that dropped him for most people is the injuries. He had the cervical, a genetic issue that basically no one's ever played football after a surgery to overcome. Well, the proof's already there. So instead of sitting here and double dipping and going, well, no one's ever come back to play football like that. Well, he just did. He spent a whole year doing it. And and the doctors literally said he has no greater of a chance of a catastrophic injury than any other player who steps on the field. That's enough. Put that away. The thing that now people are double dipping is that some of them forget that he actually is playing. He played all year last year on a stress fracture, a Jones fracture in his foot. And he had to get Toradol shots pretty much weekly, which means they wear off by the end of the half. And so he's been playing with a quarterback who was not Trevor Lawrence, not remotely Trevor Lawrence, not remotely like Chad Kelly when Chad Kelly was at Clemson, not remotely like he might not even be like some of the other guys who didn't make the NFL, and playing on this bad foot. He had to spend when he finally the season was over, he got surgery in November, had to be immobilized for 6 to 8 weeks before he could start training for the combine. Unlike Garrett Wilson, who had a good 12, 13 weeks and was healthy before he started so that he could game the combine system. Justin Ross had to start from a deficit, and he still ran a 4.56 and jumped 31 and a half inches. To me, when I asked a biomechanics expert who has some scouting, who was a scout, and I said, I
like that you have a biomechanics guy.
I do.
It's important to have a biomechanics guy.
He's been an RSP subscriber since 2007.
I love it.
So he's.
What happened the first year?
I don't know, man.
Okay, all right. I'm gonna
probably Greg Bell.
He's a biomechanics guy. Why you would?
Yeah, probably Greg, because I didn't know what I was doing. But I didn't know what I was doing until probably about 2010, and even then, I would say I was half knew what I was doing. He said to me, he goes, "No, I don't think there's anything off base of what this narrative that you're putting forth here." He goes, I was surprised he was anywhere close to what he did. He's not healthy. He's not healthy right now. He'll be healthy sometime in camp. And so sometime probably by August, I'm betting that some team will go, wow, he's a lot more explosive than we thought he was. And so he could be a better version of Hakeem Nicks if things work out, but we'll see.
I like it. Okay, so some wide receiver rapid fires here, 1 or 2 sentences. So I'm assuming this is another question from 1912 Fantasy. Williams, I'm assuming this is Jameson Williams being a body catcher. Yeah. Let's use this time to talk about Jameson Williams then, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, from what I've seen of Williams, I thought that there was enough evidence that he knew how to use his hands the way that you would expect him to. From the standpoint of what I saw, he uses underhand with targets near his belt line. He understands that sometimes he'll use underhand technique where overhand is preferable, but it's something that's a common issue. A lot of people have that where they've got to spend the time on the jugs machine and really practice certain trajectories.
So that can be coached.
That can be coached. He uses overhand technique well without clapping onto it. He can extend for the ball. He does a lot of those things well. It's just a matter of him just making the effort to get better at that. And that could be Deontay Johnson, like where he has a year where he leads the league in drops or has a high drop rate and then has to get back down to fundamentals. So I'm not too worried about that with him.
I like it. So next rapid fire, compare and contrast Christian Watson, which is timely by Kyle's money. You didn't miss it. We saved it just for you. Glad you're back. So Christian Watson versus Alec Pierce, you have them wide receiver 6 versus wide receiver 7 in your rankings. They both seem to be, and again, this is Andrew, they seem to be like potential, a lot of unmolded clay there. 6'3", 6'4" for each of them. What's the compare and contrast then? Because they are close in your rankings.
Yeah, I actually think I think the guys with, that are, moldable potential are more guys like Treylon Burks and George Pickens.
Okay, good. Okay.
So I actually look at Pierce and Pierce is a guy who I think can play as a contributor, third or fourth receiver right away.
Immediately.
He's more of a Justin Jefferson type with a little bit more heft.
I saw that.
A little bit more.
God, I wish I put that in the show sheet. Alec Pierce equals Justin Jefferson.
There's a lot to that. He's not the route runner Justin Jefferson is, but you can put him inside like Justin Jefferson, have him block linebackers and safeties. And as a result of that, off of play action, they have to buy into the fact that he might block them. And then he can run routes off of that. And he's a great pass catcher in contested situations and going up for the ball. He's not the runner Justin Jefferson is, but again, he's bigger, he jumps higher, he's just as quick and fast, and he's got very good hands. Christian Watson, to me, is more of a Javon Walker upside type or a Martavis Bryant upside type in terms of what they could do on the field when everything goes well. And that's, again, a player who has terrific hands, experience in a West Coast offense, which is underrated for the fact that he's used to having to make adjustments with his quarterback and understanding the verbiage that comes with West Coast offenses that a lot of players in spread offenses have to overthink a lot early on in the league. He might be able to add another 8 to 12 pounds to his frame, and he's already a physical guy with very good skill after the catch. I think he's closer to becoming a starter than people think.
Got it. Okay, so multiple clay, Treylon Burks, you have him wide receiver 13. Are we projecting all of our love of Debo and A.J. Brown onto him and hoping the very best case for him?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. This is the same. This is the Jordan Love is the next Patrick Mahomes. Yeah. The Drew Lock is that, Baker Mayfield is the next Drew Brees. Brett Favre and Russell Wilson rolled into one. He's Kenny Galladay. He's a Kenny Galladay type too. Yeah. That's basically what these guys are. He's not Debo. He's not, and he's a guy that has to be physical to be a route runner in situations where he needs to be a finesse guy. So he's got some work to do. Again, he and Pickens, they can be starters. I just don't. They're going to need some time,
they need work.
and they might not have the system to be able to exploit them the way that Debo was exploited.
Arkansas. How about David Bell?
I was going to say Arkansas was fun as hell to watch college football this past year, and plus their coach, if you've ever seen him on Twitter, loves to hit people with a "yes sir" and his super Southern accent. You know what I'm talking about, Matt? He was the offensive line coach at Georgia.
Yeah.
Yes sir. If you saw the clips, you know what I was talking about. Yeah, I'm not a psychopath.
No, you're not. Not at all.
Okay. David Bell. Yeah, I digress.
What you just want me to? Is there a specific question about it? Just I mean, he's basically Jarvis Landry, Anquan Bolden, if his upside works out in terms of that his conceptual and technical skills and the understanding of the game supersede his athletic ability, and that's the biggest concern with him. If I could get a guarantee that his athletic ability wouldn't drag him down, he would be in my top 5. But I don't have that guarantee. I think he's one of the best. I've been picking him in Devy leagues before I saw how his athletic ability expressed himself, and I think he's a dynamite football player. Yeah, he's great. He's just slow. Yep. He's slow, not very quick, and he doesn't have acceleration. So but if it works out where they can fit him, that'd be great. Skye Moore. I'll answer that. I mean, I like him. I think he can become a contributor early and eventually a starter. I think he's better at the catch point than he is as a runner, while everyone else says he's a better runner than he is at the catch point. But I think it's kind of reversed. But he's a solid player. I think the things that he does after the catch, people have overrated a little bit.
Before we jump to the next two guys, On Skye Moore, I want you to tell me, Matt, how screwed am I? Because I've been taking him a lot in early best ball. Is Skye Moore going to be an early contributor for me, or am I just dead in the water with all my Skye Moore? And you can be honest.
No, I think it's very fit dependent. Okay. You're in a boom bust situation with him. That's how I see it.
Where I love to be. As long as I'm not dead. I'd rather be boom bust.
That's the one thing we don't want.
Yeah.
I mean, but seriously though, I mean, I've been, because like I'm sort of in the same situation with David Bell. I've been taking a ton of David Bell. Yeah. And as long as I'm not completely dead in the water, I'm fine with it.
Yeah. Just we're gonna have to see the fit with him, but I'm open to it.
Love it. All right, last two, and then we'll move to one more plug nonsense, and we'll get you out of here, Matt. So Danny Gray and Velus Jones from the listeners.
Danny Gray has some potential to become a contributor because he tracks the ball very well. He has some issues with zone routes where he basically makes himself open and signals to the receiver or the quarterback that he's open when he's not. And that happens in zone coverage where, there's been some interceptions where he turns and shows his eyes to the quarterback and he shouldn't have because he misread the coverage. Some route release and hands issues are all things that he got to get better at. He's kind of a developmental guy.
That's me playing pickup basketball. I'm always calling for the ball.
There you go.
You got to feed the big dog.
Yep. Well, that's kind of where we're at. And Velus Jones, I'm just not high on him at all. I know that he's got some athletic ability. He could be a return specialist for you. Maybe he can give you what Marquez Callaway gave you in surprise and exceed expectations. But I just didn't see a lot of technical skills there that were refined enough to be strong on him unless you were in a super deep league with a big practice squad.
I like it. Okay. All right. Thanks, Matt. Let's get one more plug in. Let's get some nonsense. We'll get you out of here. So Veridian Global, another one of our sponsors. We have FFPC, Underdog, Veridian Global. Dan, question for you. They've got a ton of great merch. You got to go there. We've got some Go District stuff up there. I made a dumb comment when I was in the throes of my accounting. JD made a dumb comment. I said, print the damn shirts. Did we ever get the I don't mock, I best ball shirts printed?
I don't think we have that one going yet.
All right.
We've definitely got to get that one moving.
Okay, we got to get that one moving. Anyways, Veridian Global for all your great fantasy football, NFL player puns. You're going to get a whole new pool of players from the NFL draft. A lot of good puns. Got to get the merch. Got to get the shirts. Go District gear. All of it. Veridian Global. You're going to love it.
And it fits great. I mean, it fits great. It wears great. It's just it's good, comfortable stuff.
Look, Kyle's money is already throwing his damn wallet at the I don't mock I best ball. So good.
There we go.
Print the damn shirts. So listen, here's a call to action. I'm learning how to podcast here. Instead of hitting smash the likes, smash the subscribe, do all that. Here's what I want to know. I think I can transfer some of my Underdog credit that I have to you guys. So I'm going to do that. For any of the listeners, whether you're listening live or you're listening on the podcast app, here's what I want you to do. MattWaldmanRSP.com. I want you to tweet at this show. I want you to tweet with your favorite running back 10 through 15 from Waldman's and running back or wide receiver 10 through 15. Your favorite. Tweet at me because that means you heard this call to action. It means you got the RSP guide. Let me know who you like, and we'll figure out who the winner is, and I'll transfer some of my credit, or I'll just buy you something nice from Underdog. Want to get you guys listening to the show and locked in here, and also buying Matt's guide. So, Matt, you've stuck with us 75 plus. We'll get you out of here with some nonsense. Quick question: I put tight ends in the nonsense category. That's kind of messed up. Are tight ends relevant this year?
They can be, yeah, but it's a. I think they might be. You got to remember that I play in leagues with like 40, 50 man rosters.
Yeah.
So maybe the answer is no. But there's some guys you want to monitor.
Give us two names outside Trey McBride, because you mentioned him earlier. Yeah. I think that everyone's on him. Who are some other names that we should be monitoring?
I would say Cole Turner and Curtis. He's not relevant.
Charlie Kohler.
No. I like Charlie Kohler. Kohler is another one. You can easily say him too. But I was also thinking moreover of where is he? Curtis Hodges. Cole Turner and Curtis Hodges. Kohler to me is high up there, but Turner and Hodges are both tall, over 6'6". Hodges is 6'8". They have very good skills at catching the football, making adjustments against tight coverage. And I think that they're the type of guys that might get drafted late in the NFL who wind up having roles at some point down the line. So keep an eye on them.
I like it. And we play in tight end premium leagues. I don't know if I play any leagues as deep as 45, but I like those names. So appreciate that, Matt. So couple rapid fire here. One name of a player whose film was the most fun to watch. Now this could be good, bad, and different, but which player, and you, 1 to 2, whatever you want, but who was really fun that when you fired up their film, you're like, okay, I'm so glad I get to watch more of this player. You can't love all your children. That's
yeah,
the
I know. Keontae Ingram of USC, the running back.
Okay. I like
he's
it.
a sleeper. He's reminds me a little bit of Kareem Hunt and Chris Ivory.
Oh, love it.
Nice.
Great name. Okay. Be mean because I can't get through a whole podcast without being nice to somebody. One name of a good player. So he's got to be a name. Good player may be subjective here. Whose film was an absolute chore to watch. So the opposite on the spectrum. Well, I got to watch more of his game tape, but it's like either the team surrounding him or the player himself is just making me bored out of my mind. It's a chore to fire up more of this tape.
There's a lot of players like that. There are. I mean, there's players you're watching who you just go, they're not going to make it in the NFL. Yeah. I know this already physically, but I still have to do my due diligence to watch the player. I'm going to give you a good player, but I'm going to give you a good player. Then I'm going to say, after a while, I was just posting stuff that I called danger, no danger, and basically said he didn't know the difference between the two, and he needs a visor with a light that shows red and green when he reads leverage. And it's the guy that is probably going to be picked first in the NFL draft at quarterback, and that's Desmond Ritter. I'm not going near Desmond Ritter. I think so. I know a lot of people seem to be in love with him, but I know he has a reject grade with some scouts. And I found that out after I didn't like him, and he's way down on my board compared to everybody else. He just, to me, again, intuitive quarterbacking is understanding where the leverage is and knowing that you got to begin to throw the football, in addition to some mechanical issues that he has just repeatedly with throws that he should be able to make and then project to the NFL. He didn't know the difference between open and not open unless he had to scramble, and he could buy that time. And sorry, man, I mean, all I'll say is this, is I may be wrong, but I haven't been wrong about Love. I haven't been wrong about Baker Mayfield. I haven't been wrong about Drew Lock.
Tell the haters, man.
And they're all the players that people were like about all the players that people had drafted very highly. Mitchell Trubisky, you can add him to the list.
Blake
as
Bortles.
Another one. Blake, well, I kind of like Blake Bortles a little bit.
I didn't like
but that was way back in the day. You were good. So, I learned my lesson a little bit with Blake. But yeah, Ritter to me, I just feel like that he's going to get his opportunities, but I don't think he's going to get a second contract in the league as a starter.
Got it. Okay, one last nonsense for you. I love this question, even though it might be the same, so I hope I get a different answer. You know the Benny Hill theme? Am I an idiot for saying that? Like the yakety stacks?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
I know that.
Who's the player who had the most goofball plays, or you just see some dumbass shit on the field whenever their team was like the ball was squirting all over the place, or like, did you ever how many of these Benny Hill type plays were out there, and which player had the most of them, if you can think of any?
Well, there were some good Benny Hill type of plays.
Okay, good. Yeah,
Zaquandre White out of South Carolina was a good example. Khalil Pimpleton out of Central Michigan was a great punt returner and receiver who has high effort, leads to like almost that Benny Hill, Charlie Chaplin-esque type of like crazy stuff somehow turns out okay type of stuff. That's good. Unfortunately, I would say some of Malik Willis's scrambles are Benny Hill-esque, where you wind up throwing a 1-yard pass into tight coverage where you should have just continued running the football. And didn't seem, scrambling and running are two different things. And I feel like he has some issues with that. So yeah, those are examples of some guys.
I love it. By the way, Zaquandre White, I think he transferred away from Florida State. He ended up punching. He got frustrated in another Florida State loss. He punched someone on the Florida sideline during one of, or maybe Clemson. Yeah, I think it was on the Clemson game a couple of years ago.
If he's the one player that if I got a chance to be a running back coach, like if I had the skills to be a running back coach, I'd pay to coach him because the raw skills are there. Yeah. But again, I've never coached running backs. So just like we all have our bad pickers with stuff, it would probably be my Michael Westbrook bad picker type of situation with them. But I'd still try it.
Matt, that is so great to end the player value. You killed this. We went through so many players. I'm so appreciative for you giving us a little bit of extra time.
Yes.
Any final words? I can't. I mean, I don't know about you, Dan, but I can't thank Matt enough for the time he gave today. The number of players we went through, the evaluations, the nonsense questions we went through, and somehow you still pulled great nuggets of information out of all the nonsense. So you're great at cutting through it all. Dan, I don't know about you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this was some fantastic stuff. I mean, just kind of a nice, just skipping through the RSP here. There's just so much more to it, but just we're just touching the surface along the way. Just kind of like a stone skipping across the lake. That's what we've been doing here. And there's definitely a lot more underneath the surface of the water than what you're getting here. So make sure you get that RSP and get underneath the water. Do some scuba diving and find out what's under there.
Yeah. Matt, anything else for you to plug? You got the RSP. I think I heard you on the Christopher Harris podcast. You had a couple of GoFundMe's. Anything that you want to talk about here? Just want to make sure you get any of your rightful plugs in for all the time that you gave us here tonight.
I appreciate that. I want to do two things then, and I'm going to share one thing in a minute here for you guys to share when I pull this up. First of all, with the RSP, you have the pre-draft and post-draft publication. It's available for $21.95 at mattwaldman.com. You're also put on a newsletter throughout the year, and that newsletter gives you updates on this class as well as the next class. So it's a great deal from that perspective. There's also the RSP projections and Dynasty rankings, where I give you 2 years worth of projections. It's not for 2 years running, but I'll give you for the year that you buy it, you get projections for 2022 as well as an early look at 2023. And then I give you a win now and long build cheat sheet that I keep updated with tiers with those players that I update multiple times throughout the year. That's available for $24.95 at mattwaldman.com. And know that up to $5,000 is donated every year to Darkness to Light, an organization devoted to preventing sexual abuse of children. April is National Child Abuse Prevention Month, so it coincides pretty well there with that. The organization is a top-rated charity that does a great job of being able to train people in organizations on how to prevent sexual abuse, as well as how to handle it appropriately when it is reported, so it doesn't compound the trauma for the victim. And the RSP has given over $50,000 to that charity for the past 10 years.
Awesome, Matt.
So yeah, proud of that. And I don't normally do GoFundMe's, but a fantasy player who was a Football Guy subscriber for a long time and who was an RSP subscriber in the past as well, contacted me. This is John Hodges, and John was he spent almost 25 years working at a hospital in Modesto County, California, retired, had a little bit of a nest egg with his wife, rented a house out in the Sierra Mountains, and basically experienced a home invasion. The guy shot up the place, cracked his skull in 4 places. Besides the trauma, the landlord at that point was like, I'm out of being a landlord. I'm going to sell this place. You guys are going to have to leave. And as a result of that, he's been in and out of a homeless state for the past 3 years, trying to do it on his own. And they're living in a dilapidated trailer outside of, I believe, in Oregon, but they're trying to move closer to their daughter and have a base so that everybody in the family can kind of be in a good position. And he's dealing with kidney disease. And you just imagine people, if you've ever experienced poverty or people have experienced poverty, it's usually one thing after another when you get into that cycle. And he's been in that cycle and trying to get out of it. And so I've been notifying people and kind of promoting this since after the Super Bowl. We've been managed to go from raising he had about $350 in account. He's over 80% of the way to his goal. And this will help him and his wife get to where they need to be. And I know that John is appreciative of any type of donation, as well as if you can't donate, even if you can't donate, $5 or $10, and you just and you can share it. Sharing it may get you someone who might be able to help him. We had someone who's might be able to help him find a job, in a sense that can coincide with, what his health issues are and still be able to do some work from that perspective. So you might just end up getting it in front of the eyes of somebody who can really do a lot more, either in terms of money or resources. So, please give that some consideration if you don't mind. And again, thank you for letting me be able to share all that.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you don't mind, just dropping us the link to this.
I will.
Yes,
after the show is over, and
I'll put it in the private chat right now.
Awesome. You're a great person, kind heart, and great for the fantasy community. This was awesome, Matt. Appreciate that.
Well, thank you. Yep.
Okay, so and also, by the way, you're too nice. I've been saying mattwaldmanrsp.com. You should have been saying it's Matt, correcting me the whole time.
No, they're both right. They're both right.
Oh,
because no, it's my problem. See, like I have to combine the two sites. You can learn more about the RSP at mattwaldmanrsp.com.
Oh, good.
If you just want to forget all that and just buy it, you go to mattwaldman.com.
Oh, thank God. Okay, I was going to have all the editors have to.
No, you were perfect with what you did.
There's no editors here, Matt. Okay, that's awesome.
That's what my boss used to say at UGA when I was an editor for 10 years. So there we go.
So good.
Nice.
Well, look, guys, I did my best JD and Theo impression. I know the people who were expecting their regular dose of them were disappointed that they got my nonsense. But you can find me at AM Schellenberg. Dan, how about you? And we'll get Matt and we'll get everyone out of here.
Yeah, you can find me at Overhyped Sweeper. Drop the final E from Sweeper, and Matt just as your name looks is how it's spelled, at Matt Waldman.
Yep.
And thank you all for being here with us. We really appreciate it. And
tomorrow night too. Hold on, sorry to cut you off. I think there's a show tomorrow night, right?
Yes, we do have a show tomorrow night with Scott Connor, who is Charles B. Chill on Twitter, and we're gonna get deep into some dynasty theory there, spending a little bit of time talking about all the non-player part of dynasty. So make sure you're looking forward to that. It's gonna be a great conversation. Scott is just, I think, one of the brightest minds in dynasty when it comes to theory. So make sure you check that out too. And thank you all for being here. Again, make sure you're checking out the FFPC. Make sure that you're checking out Underdog. Check out Veridian Global if you're looking for some good fantasy football gear. And last but not least, make sure you check. We're gonna post that GoFundMe from Matt.
Absolutely.
So make sure you check that out too. We really appreciate that, and we are gonna check you all later.
Goat District, you know the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text? That trash offer's the best? You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden, they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT District, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man. Y'all know what to do. It's the and I always be traded. And I always be traded. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them. Fish.
Matt,